are going to be around this fall. We plan to bring Michael Snow from Canada, some of you are familiar with him, Barbara Hammer, and I don't think the third person has been chosen, but Stan will also be showing his latest work this fall. So we have those three people for sure. If you want to get on the mailing list or would like to receive our program, please leave us a note with your name and address on it. And once again, I've asked Stan to introduce this evening's show because he's familiar with Nick Dorsky's work and knows him as well. So, Stan, if you will.
There are some introductions that are really hard, just like some letters of recommendation. What do you do when you have to write a letter of recommendation to someone who's just achieved the pinnacle of his or her art, or of anything that the world has imagined in something or other? And then you have to write and say, gee, this is really an important person and should receive, $10,000 in order to stagger on or whatever. Very hard letters to write. What do you say? Because if you're too enthusiastic, then people don't believe you. In fact, if you're enthusiastic at all these days, the cool edge of the society doesn't believe you. But in the case of Nick Dorsky, I do face a little bit that problem because he really has achieved such a clarity of filmmaking and such a precision and perfection of color and tone, and of which is to say the base, the shading of the light, and put that to a purpose of line and construct in a way that no one else even dreamed of doing. And so that when the experience for me, after seeing one of his films for however many times, however many at the time that I've seen it, is that I've had an epitome of filmic experience. And I have a new one this evening that I've never seen before. But Nick Dorsky has never let me down. And here he is.
Because there's no program notes, I thought I would say a short introductory thing about the show itself, and then between each film, maybe say 3 sentences, 4 sentences, because all the films are weird, and weird in the greatest way. The first film we're going to see, I think it's an interesting set of films. They're a half an hour, 20 minutes, and a half an hour. And they're all silent. So it might be a bit challenging. The first film has no images. It's actually it somewhat concerns having a courtship with cinema herself, so to speak. When I was a certain period of my life, I guess it was in the mid-'70s, early '70s, I had moved out to California from the East Coast and felt like a displaced Indian in a potted plant in a new environment. I sort of couldn't understand the trees, the weather. It was all rather odd. And I lost interest in the world around me. It had no mythic or memorable mythic qualities to me. I think we probably all experienced this going to California. And so that I was, on top of that I was depressed. I was coming off the 1960s and all that. I was sort of depressed. And I was only buying very old rolls of film which had no chance of even producing a good image. And at one point I was so depressed that I only shot half a roll and sent it into the lab. And I got the roll back, and the part I didn't shoot was great. And I got very interested in that. The part I didn't shoot was just the deterioration of the film itself being maybe 15 or 20 years out of date. And I realized that I wasn't interested in the images of the world at that point with my camera, but I was somehow very interested in what the film itself was communicating to me. Perhaps that I had gotten so internal at that point in my life that seeing film in its preconceptual state, or its internal state, I felt very good about. In other words, seeing film before you impose images on it, in a way you let her, so to speak, dream or just be yourself without making her do anything for you. As you know, she spends most of the time selling products and causing a lot of terror and so forth. There seemed to be something that was really enjoyable about actually letting you feel her herself. And later on, I I collected all this outdated material. Some of it was 20 years old. Usually for a quarter or free in a comic store, and almost got laughed at, and just processed them all normally. So in this film, there are maybe 15 or 20 different emulsions. There's different kinds of film from all over the world. It's an international collection of Fuji, Gavard, Eastman, and all the very obscure American products before the world sort of, as you know now, there's only 2 or 3 companies in the world in general. And at this time there was Ansco and Ilford and something called Dynachrome. And there was just all these wonderful, like, little fly-by-night film companies that had probably, I don't know what their stocks actually were. Anyway, one realized that each one of these stocks in themselves had their own life. And the life that they had was very similar, I felt, to one's own internal life. In other words, what it felt like to be angry, not in terms of the images or language that would come out of that, but let's say the heat of anger, or the coolness of sitting in the afternoon under a tree. And it seems to me that each of the film stocks, in their essence, had a very human quality to them, a quality which was very synchronous with the pre-verbal or sense of being, to the degree we're a pure mortal coil, in that sense. To the degree we experience ourselves as mortal coil, the film was experiencing itself. And so I organized it and got very interested in color after image and so forth. That the way the film is organized is a lot of times, if you know anything about color after image, it's a big topic, but the point is that if your eye gets saturated with a certain color, and then you cut to another color, it affects the next color you want to see. And so that many times I was working very heavily with that, so that at the moment of the cut, there could be like a burst of a color happening, that combination would be the combination of the previous color in your mind and the color on the screen. And then as that piece of film goes on, let's say over a period of 10 or 15 seconds, your brain readjusts itself and you sort of slowly arrive in the next area of the metabolism of the cinema. Ansco, 400 ASA, 20 years old, and then on and on. So the film's a bit challenging. It's called Pneuma, P-N-E-U-M-A, which is a Greek word meaning wind or fire in Stoic philosophy in Greece during the heyday of Greece. It meant the wind or fire which is in your body, or which is in animals or in the grass or in the water, the elemental, pre-verbal, I think sense of God or goddess, actually, that stormed and stormed and burned and everything, within everything. The film, you'll find, I know some of you were at a talk I was at yesterday, I repeat somewhat the same thing again, that there'll be times when you might momentarily feel the film isn't giving you enough, in the traditional sense of what you want out of a screen. And at that point, I would again suggest to relax, go back to yourself if you have your own thoughts or whatever, and then come back to the screen. But I think as you begin to relate to the screen more and more, as such, you'll start to see that some of these emulsions, for whatever reasons, appear in front of the screen. They're out, like they're 3 or 4 feet out, some are way behind the screen, some are right on the level of the screen. And that, I don't know if it's going to work here, probably won't because there's no black mat. But sometimes the area around the film, in this particular film, takes on its own juxtaposed sense of color and so forth. So I don't think I could possibly say anything more. And thank you. I know I shouldn't say this, but it seems important in a way. This whole projection tonight, there's two things that aren't really representative of what the films are. One is that different projectors have different color balances. And I have prints which are appropriate for them. And so this projector is quite blue. And I have a print which is appropriate for it, but there's some miscommunication and I didn't bring it. And so that a lot of the color tensions have become slightly homogenized because of that. The other thing is that my films all should go at 18 frames a second. And I guess there's also a miscommunication about that. And this projector is going at 24 frames a second. And I mention that particularly because of the next film, which is to make up for this lack of imagery, is an explosion of imagery, which may almost be too much white water at 24 frames a second, but we have no choice. What it was is that I was making the last film we're going to show tonight, which in a certain way is a coming out of the womb of this first film, which is somewhat in the womb in a sense. And the last film is very meticulous, very carefully photographed and all that. And out of a need to balance my own psyche or metabolism, whatever, I wanted to make a very spontaneous, very visceral kind of, visceral isn't quite the word, but just a very full film to sort of balance out this very spacious, meticulous film. And someone gave me an 8mm camera, and I started to shoot them. Actually, I think Stan in 23rd Psalm Branch had some imagery, I don't know if you're familiar with that film, where an 8mm is shown where you don't slit it down the middle and both sides are shown. Maybe I should explain that for 1 second, because that's part of the game structure, so to speak, of the film, is that in old 8mm, before Super 8, you photograph down one side of the film, turn the film over, and went back down the other, just like in an audio cassette. Going down one side, you turn it over and go down. And so in effect what this is by not having the lab split the film in half, you're seeing both audio tracks to continue to be parallel at the same time. So 8mm is projected as 16, you actually see 4 boxes at the same time. And I began to just enjoy the lightness and invisibility of these old cameras, which used to cost about 50 cents. And that most modern people think they're Walkmans or something. They actually don't understand that they're cameras. And that you can walk around the street with them and just have a certain kind of joy. First of all, you can actually fit them in like this kind of pocket. And where you don't think about them. And I just got into, so this is the 17 Reasons Why, which is what this film is called, is a series of variations in the spirit of piano variations, whatever, separated by a black leader, all done within an 8mm camera. So that the left, there's superimpositions, and the game, so to speak, is that as you shoot down one side, turn the film over, you have to remember what was on the other side during that period of the roll. And it actually becomes quite enjoyable. And by putting in various kinds of black frames, every 2 frames, 1 frame, you can suspend an image up in a corner, all sorts of variations, pretty much like learning to play bagpipes or something. And that's pretty much what this film is. And in this film, there's also a combination of very nice in-date Kodachrome, some extremely old rolls of Kodachrome 2, which I would find in camera bags of pawn shops. You go, can I see that camera? And there'd be still like a 20-year-old roll of film in the sort of go like that, and so forth. And so there's all sorts of film stocks in this too. And it's a real burst. And a friend, Larry Fagan, pointed out that where most films go forward through time, through montage, one shot then the next, this film sort of corkscrews through montage. You sort of cork through time. Your eye sort of circulates around the screen. And I don't know if I've ever even seen it at 24, so hold on your seats. The next film is the last, and it's the one I have least to say about, actually. Its subject matter is sand and film. And it's somewhat about progression of life, the muse of cinema interacting with the muse of sand, and which may sound like a crock, someone visiting from California, but I think it's actually quite true. And I don't know if the projection's up to it, frankly. The projectors are quite focused really well, etc. But let's give it a shot. Okay, thank you. Can I entertain any questions or comments? It's okay.
Why have you been with the sound piece? Why did you choose not to do the sound piece?
Has anyone ever heard that question? Yeah. Filmmakers make a vow that every time they answer that question, they have to answer it differently. And the last time I answered it, I said because I'm an only child. And I don't like a lot of noise. That's about as honest an answer as I can do. One small elaboration is that I think quite genuinely one gets overwhelmed by what it actually is to be a being. And that actually reduces one to silence, I think. And it's that arena of intuition and feeling that I want to make my films about. I think if there are some very great sound filmmakers, I wouldn't know what to do with it except in a more conventional talking situation where people are talking. On the whole, I feel really want my feeling that sound often is used like training wheels on a bicycle. And I feel these films are for adults, and that in a way the lack of sound is actually an act of generosity, and it allows you the space to explore your being and explore the screen, rather than my sort of giving you, holding you by the hand and saying, this is the way to look, or this is the way to feel. There are many ways to answer that question.
17 reasons why did you use all the film that you shot? Were you editing that a lot?
No, that was highly edited after it was shot. You can't change the variation between the left and right side of the screen. That's a solid thing. But then you can take all those pieces and make them function in terms of editing. Yes, there's lots and lots of cuts.
So you were splicing. Were you splicing generally within, because those 8mm films were 4 minutes long, right? Something like that. I mean, so were you splicing within the one film each time? 17 reasons, was it like you had 17 pieces of film that you would then?
I mean, were these from 17
each
more?
one as a piece, and then working within it.
Well, I'll tell you a secret.
Slice across.
Just between you and me, there's actually 20 of them. Because there are 20 of them. This one, I actually found out there are 20 reasons why. But the 17 refers to the sign, of course, which appears at the end of the film, which is one of our town's great cultural landmarks. No, I would say, let's say there are 20 sections, probably 40 rolls, 50 rolls, of film. Some of them are very close to what they were in the camera. They're all different. Some are made up of 5 rolls of film, some are made up of 1 roll of film. Some of them have 1 or 2 splices in them. Some have 30 splices, 40 splices. Does that answer the question?
Superimposing,
Yes.
How do you make the parts all that's the process?
Which parts are film?
Like near the end of 7 reasons why. Everything.
Yeah, that was a roll of Anscochrome that I snuck through a Kodachrome and Alaya.
In Pneuma, did you do anything to the film after you got it back?
Yeah, some of the material has been rephotographed, in other words, blown up slightly. Do you know what I mean?
Not really.
Well, in other words, some of them I rephotographed within the frame so that what was in there to be seen was seen. Without this being an apology, the film has a tremendous amount of emulsion life and turbulence, which this projection situation was not able to reproduce. So sometimes when the screen looks like a flat gray area, you're seeing a very intimate portrait of a particular emulsion, which has all sorts of, some of them spiral out, some might go like this, some just sort of start to shoot like that, just take off. And that level, which is really the level the film was at, was hardly perceivable. I don't know if it's the glass is dirty or the lens just is not up to. It's not, the amount of, the green light coming off the exit lights is pretty extreme, et cetera.
When you photograph those scenes, there's some flash out and back. Is that part of the process? Did you do that?
No, some of them were just falling apart that way. Yeah?
I was wondering about the different ways you shot the sand. Did you talk about that? Was there
Well,
large, magnified, how many?
well, when you're down to the screens, it's done with extension tubes. And most everything in that film is really what it is. It's a tripod, a camera, it's all wind, and it's the real situation. A couple of the things were done inside with extension tubes and with photo floods because it was just you couldn't stabilize the camera enough in the sand, even if you got it in the sand is so liquid. So a few of them are done, artificially like that. I say 85% is what is. In organizing the film, I had a problem. This might be interesting to filmmakers. I didn't have the courage. I didn't think that I could sustain a one-subject film, and I tried various other subjects to integrate with it. And what happened is that when you cut away to another subject and came back to sand, it reinforced the symbolic sort of cheap symbolism of saying time passing, the universe in a grain of sand. And in other words, it brought it back into that sort of literary, it became a literary metaphor. So the idea, I knew that I had to continue with sand so that we'd forget that it was sand and it would go into some more, goddess, Demeter or whatever, that kind of stuff. And so so what I did is I photographed, I got some very old film once again, this is my lifesaver, and underexposed shots and at the lab print them up. So there are times when the grain of the film and the grain of the sand, one would actually dominate over the other. And so there was a flux between the film grain dominating sometimes. And these aren't just like avant-garde or film techniques to me. They really have to do with these, giving the screen a sense of ephemeral space and then juxtaposing that with something solid. So that the film a lot of times is a juxtaposition between space and solidity. And there's something, and to me, that you get hit right here. And there's something very sad about it in the most positive sense of the word. There's this kind of sadness of being and also beauty. Yes?
I have a question about grains of sand that was sparkling, but was very black.
Yeah. That sand someone brought me from Hawaii. When I was making this film, it became sort of a joke. Everyone would bring me sand from wherever they went. And I have actually 200, 300 bottles of sand from Antarctica to Miami Beach, everywhere. And that was sand from Hawaii, so that was lava sand, which was underexposed to different degrees. So the metaphor of the stars, began to appear at the very end.
What's Alaya?
Alaya is a Sanskrit word. I can never say that word. About 5 words I can't say. What's one Sanskrit word? Script? And please, Anne can say it. How do you say it?
Sanskrit.
I still can't do it.
Sanskrit.
I know, it's a Sanskrit word. And it means sort of like Pat Boone. Love letters in the sand. But it means accumulation. Like a Himalaya, Himalaya, the mountains, I think means an ice accumulation. So it's it has to do with accumulation. And it's used philosophically in Sanskrit to deal with that part of your being, which is the most primordial point that you accumulate as an individual. It's before your ideas. It's that thing, I've heard it described as it's that part of you which is your dearest friend and you can't touch it. But you know when you're with it that it's your you could call essence in a sense. It's sort of the most primordial sense of individuality that we can experience. It's a wonderful thing to be found. So it seemed appropriate. Also, it seemed Alaya seemed almost like the way the sound of Alaya. That kind of thing. Well, thank you.